This is a fund that allows you to have breathing space. It actually says breathing space in the Internal Revenue Code. And what it really is used for, and what it is, it's kind of a collection area. It allows, it's set up by, in the asbestos context, it's set up by the plaintiff's firm for all of their similarly situated clients. So in the asbestos world here, we use Mike here as an example. You know, the Simmons guys would have one master 468B, or this magic escrow account set up where all of their claims for all of their plaintiffs would pay into. And what it really does, it allows, like I said, it allows for breathing space, and it allows for a lot of different things. There's a lot of different benefits to setting these up. One is it allows the clients to kind of have some time to consider their financial options. You know, some of you may be familiar with structured settlements for the clients, and traditionally in the asbestos world, they're not that common. Mainly because there's 20, 30, 40 different defendants paying at all different times. It's hard to manage the money coming in for the individual claimants. That's a good example of one of the benefits of the 468B. It allows for, if the firm has this set up, it allows for the clients to kind of, like, hey, I may be interested in doing this. Well, here's this $15,000 check and this $200,000 check. They can all kind of collect in that 468B. It allows for the plaintiff attorneys to also consider their options. It's not very common in the asbestos world, but the plaintiff attorneys have the ability to defer their fees. So this kind of lays that out. Probably most importantly, and why people in here would be the most interested, it really helps with lien resolution and different issues related to that. Because really the 468B, we like to call it, it's kind of like a substitute defendant. Like I said, the 468B is set up with a court order that can be set up in any jurisdiction. And once it's set up, with Mike and Steve settle a case, Steve writes the check or gets the check and it goes directly into that 468B. And Steve and his clients they're done. There's no ongoing liability for with any lien resolution issues, Medicare, Medicaid, all those kinds of things. They're done and gone. And then it allows Mike and his firm to and take some time, figure out, call Jason at the Garrettson guys and figure out what needs to be done with the clients, whether they want to do financial, structured settlements, the attorneys want to do things, they have lien resolution issues, all of those kinds of things. So that's really kind of a basic, very basic understanding of what the 468B is. So I thought, ask a couple of these guys, or ask Mike specifically, from an organizational standpoint and a practical standpoint, maybe, how it's used.
So it's really been a great tool. It is about as simple a process as you can have, and really makes things very clean. Whether you're talking about the Medicare stuff that's on everybody's mind, or VA benefits, or state benefits, or if plaintiffs need to set up special needs trusts, or if there are other probate issues that plaintiffs have to worry about, whether it's going to be wrongful death proceeds or survivorship proceeds, and since the plaintiff does not take constructive receipt of the money while it's in the 468B, there's absolutely no tax or lien consequences or issues until those kinds of decisions have been made. So, in the 8 years we've had the 468B account, we've never had one single problem, we've never had one lien resolution problem, we've never had one encounter with Medicare that couldn't be easily worked out. And so, from an implementation process, I would urge the plaintiffs in the room, if there are any, to set those up, and for the defendants to encourage the plaintiffs to set those up, because it really does make things move a lot more quickly.
Let me ask, I'm going to come to Steve in a second to get his perspective on that, but I want to ask Jason a little about kind of the organization and getting these set up, because lot of you guys may know Jason and the Garrettson Resolution Group as just the lien guys that you call, but they also facilitate these kinds of settlements and claims administration and those kinds of things, which can be very important in these asbestos cases. But maybe Jason, you could talk a little about, when we set these up, the kinds of language and the kind of protections that you put in these to help with some of this stuff.
Sure. My perspective on this issue is really that as the independent party that serves as the fund administrator, we've utilized for quite some time, as BJ has mentioned, very commonly in product liability, medical device, exposure type of cases where there's multiple claimants, this vehicle, it's served the parties very well in that we have found in our role that the defense, the plaintiffs, the courts, insurers all equally prefer that there's a vehicle that ensures that there's uniformity and controls in place once the funds are released and placed into a qualified settlement fund. I think as far as the setup of it it's one of the great benefits. It's extremely customizable to the unique settlement that would take place and/or settlements. Again, in many product liability settings, exposure, medical device settings, nothing is as chaotic of an environment as asbestos. Because you have all the multiple defendants, multiple insurers, money coming in, money coming out, and many different issues, including healthcare compliance. And when you see what the QSF allows, it's a holding vehicle that allows many different compliance elements to take place, whether it's participation rates, qualification, allocation, healthcare compliance, probate, bankruptcy, and benefits preservation alike. It is a tool that's is become a point where it's very easy to put together because it's template and you just have inserts relative to whatever conditions may exist for a unique settlement that may be funded. It might be healthcare compliance with holdback provisions. It might be in probate or bankruptcy or allocation types of inserts that would be included. But it's very customizable to really meet the unique variables or conditions of settlement from one defendant or insurer to the other. We've found that equally recognized by all parties that there's a peace of mind relative to the controls that would be in place going forward once the funds are released.
Yeah, Steve, maybe you can talk briefly about that. What Jason was just talking about, Jason mentioned holdbacks and things like that, different things that could be put in there that, from a defense perspective, that might make you feel a little more at ease.
Thank you, BJ. Well, I'll tell you, from a defense trial lawyer perspective, this type of topic, I would classify it under supplemental proceedings. Everything that really occurs after you've got the deal done, and I don't like it. I like to move on. Once we settle a case, we hate to have issues of this type. It's frustrating to us. It's frustrating to our clients. It causes more problems than you would ever imagine it should or would, and it takes far more of your time than it should. So this is a real tough issue for those of us that don't like dealing with it. And the 468B Qualified Settlement Fund really isn't in the defense lawyer's lexicon. This isn't an issue that we deal with. This isn't an issue that we hear about, and this isn't an issue we talk about. So there's obviously a bunch of mystery, likely suspicion, and dare I say distrust when you don't really understand the vehicle, you don't know it, and the topic's brought up largely at the tail end of settlement negotiations, or maybe never. So, where does this play from our perspective? And I would say that, we first probably heard about this issue with structured settlements. Normally dealing with minors or some mentally incapacitated plaintiff where you want to set up some structured fund to form an annuity and provide some tax benefits and make sure the money's not squandered. And obviously Garrettson and others are very well versed in that, and sophisticated lawyers like Michael understand the need for some of these vehicles with their clients, even if they're elderly or dead or dying. Providing for their good future, their family's future, making sure the money is appropriately allocated, not necessarily only to government liabilities and the like, but to provide for their families, I think is very important. At the end of the day, probably benefits defendants as well. So learning more about this topic, I think, is important for all of us. And then, once you learn more about it, then you got to try to cubbyhole it into how it will help defendants resolve cases. And here is where I think the real work is. Nowadays, we just spend too much of our time with this Medicare issue. Language on releases, making sure our clients are protected, making sure the insurers are satisfied that their liabilities are extinguished when the case is resolved, satisfying our clients and insureds that nothing's going to come back to them if they have a nominal settlement and potentially receive or experience a liability that's far greater than what they paid to settle a case for a Medicare lien down the road. And it's troubling. I'll tell you, it's one of our major issues today, and you're going to hear, I think, a little bit more about it in detail. But it seems to me that this type of vehicle can be very helpful in resolving Medicare release language issues. If the court clearly has to establish or allow for the trust to be established, but I guess it's pretty simple. And then perhaps in the language of the Qualified Settlement Fund of the trust, there would be provisions that are kind of omnibus provisions that would provide for any type of liabilities when you're dealing with Medicare liens. And I don't know, Michael, if that's an issue that's been a primary issue or a tertiary issue, but I'd like to know from your perspective how you think that plays in as well.
Well, because Medicare, because this is all new to everybody, it really hasn't worked its way. The new rules really haven't worked their way through the system because, as everybody knows, Medicare keeps delaying and pushing back and changing when the new rules will be implemented. I can only, Steve, kind of talk about our experience with the 468B, and I think that's part of what you're talking about, developing a trust level with people and their systems and procedures. I think there's going to be a lot of gray area here until people actually do it, and we see how it progresses. It's easy for me to get up here and say, we've never had a problem, and you should just pay us, and it's all good. But we realize obviously that people are going to have questions as this goes forward. But I think between the examples that BJ gave earlier in the other mass torts and how it's worked and how it's been court approved, our own example using Garrettson, how it's worked and how it's been approved, we always kind of just took it upon ourselves to assume or hold back there's always going to be a lien or a Medicare problem, so we never had to get your question as of do we need specific language in every situation to kind of cover defendants that they may need. We haven't had to run into that. I wouldn't see that as being a problem, though, from the plaintiff's perspective, because the plaintiff's clients just want the money, and they're on the hook for the Medicare stuff too. So it's not like they're going to be able to escape it by getting the money in and getting the money out. So I wouldn't think that would be too big of a problem if certain defendants needed certain language in the order to kind of cover themselves.
Right. Curious to know if you guys, Steve, do you think from a defense perspective, let's talk about Mike's firm. They have one of these set up. It's been set up for a while, and here you're coming in with one of your big clients, and you're looking to settle, and you've had to deal with all these different Medicare issues and things. The fact, knowing that they have one of these set up, does it speed up the process? Maybe does it quicken the settlement negotiations?
when you put another layer into a settlement negotiation, or if you start talking about 468B qualified settlement funds, which I don't think a lot of defense lawyers are well versed in, and I don't think our clients are either, the first question that probably pops into most lawyers' minds is what's in it for me? What's in it for my client? And why would I be interested in engaging in a discussion about this? And if you tell me that I have to pay less money to settle a case, I'm all in. I'm not so sure that's where Mike's going with it. I think it sounds like more an administrative ease and certainly a tax benefit to potentially legal fees and them amortizing those as well, but certainly to the client. And the one hook that I think is a potential significant hook is the Medicare issues, because that, quite frankly, is a very difficult issue now because it's shrouded in mystery. What people are real concerned about at the end of the day is what are my liabilities, and I certainly don't want to create greater liabilities. So that to the extent that there can be another layer, if there's a trustee for the 468B, they have a fiduciary duty, and perhaps there is some comfort that the defendant, insurer or insured, can get from talking about this and having it be in the game and paying money into the fund, then I think it's a significant issue and one that can really speed up any type of supplemental proceedings.
Well, what Steve just said, I want to make it clear to kind of wrap this up. The 468B really does, we kind of tend to call it a magic escrow account or something, because it really is just an account that the firm would have set up at their own bank, but it's it's set up with a court order, and the order can be set up in any jurisdiction. Like for Mike's guys, it's set up in Madison County, but theoretically they could have gone into Cook County and had a judge enter the order. And one difference.
Mr. Cooney will tell you they can't come to Cook County.
I do want to make the point that if
One thing to follow up on Steve's point, where we've been pulled in when the Medicare issues you mentioned, it just brought things to loggerhead in other types of programs, is they've been set up with specific provisions for Medicare compliance, and to the point of inserts that are blocker arrangements on when money will be held back, how much will be held back, and then when final disbursement will take place, specifically tied to meeting requirements of data exchange for the MMSE reporting obligation, and then separately for monies held back to adequately satisfy the Medicare repayment if and when. So it very sophisticated blocker arrangements to address those issues, that both parties say, okay, this is equally protecting all parties, and it allows us to move forward with the funding of the settlement.
Right, good points. So as we kind of close up here, the 468B, it truly is and does become a substitute defendant. So from the defendant's, from Steve's perspective, all of those things that you worry about of ongoing liabilities really disappear from the defendant's perspective. And from the plaintiff's perspective, you really do get the chance to take a step back and figure out all these things that need to happen with you and your clients and the liens and things like that, without having to burden the defense for sitting around waiting for those kinds of things. So with that, thank you.
Thanks. I think that what really is important, at least a takeaway for me, is that I've found in resolutions, particularly ones that involve a large defendant with a lot of people, the defendants and the insurers have a certain level of paranoia, is too strong of a word, but they do not, having made their peace, the last thing they want on earth is to somehow expose their client to liability for Medicare, with all the attendant risks that are there. So they then put the ball in the plaintiff's court and say, listen, go get a letter from, Catherine Sebelius that says we're all fine and we've dotted all our I's and crossed our T's. Well, that's not going to happen. But what I've seen this devolve into in some jurisdictions is there is a settlement. The plaintiff knows I can't get the government to give me a blessing of my settlement, but there is no lien. So then, they don't get their money, so the defendants say, but I'm not going to give you the money until I'm certain that I don't have an ongoing liability, which then just becomes more complicated, and then you start with the motions to compel, the motions rule to show cause. That gets expensive. It's one of the things that I hate, which is a waste of time and a waste of energy to issues that can be resolved by giving it some thought ahead of time. So the more you guys can figure that out, particularly the Medicare slice, the better off we'll all be on both sides of it.
Thanks.
We have a quick morning break. I'm sure there's some coffee and drinks out there. We'll be back in about 12 minutes.
See where buddy's going? I had talked to him a couple times. I haven't seen him.